Glad to be here with you this morning. I said this in Sunday school, but I need to say it again for those of you who weren't there. This church has been a partner with Fame for decades, and we are just so grateful for your faithful support over all of these years. And it's not an exaggeration to say that we couldn't do it without you. The work that we do, we depend on churches like this one and your faithful support to enable us to do the work that we do. And so thank you so much for that. Jesus said, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going." Thomas said to him, "Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way?" And Jesus answered, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." This is an astonishing, radical claim. Perhaps even more so in our culture of today than it was at the time Jesus first said it. It's not a claim to be a way, but it's a claim to be the way, the only way to God, to salvation, and to heaven. It's a claim that's difficult for many to accept. They see Jesus' claim of exclusivity, of being the only way, as arrogance and as intolerance to those who might accept or follow a different way. But Jesus did not offer this claim without evidence. You know, anyone can claim whatever they want to claim. I could stand here this morning and tell you that I'm going to be the starting quarterback for the Colts when the season starts this fall. That might be a good thing, might not, I don't know. But I could claim that. I could claim that I only work at Fame part-time, and the rest of the time I'm a brain surgeon down at Methodist Hospital. I could claim that. I could tell you that I am the crown prince of a small African nation, and in fact, I have $40 million that I need to move if you'll just send me your account numbers. I could claim whatever I want to claim, but some point you're going to say, prove it. Show me the evidence that your claims are true. And at that point, I'd be a little stuck. I wouldn't be able to do that. Anybody can talk, anybody can write books and make speeches and say what they want to say, but at some point, there's a need for evidence. Well, Jesus provided ample evidence to support his claims. A quick read through the Gospels, and I find 34 miracles that Jesus performed. My friend John Caldwell pointed out that 23 out of the 34 miracles involve healing someone who is sick. You might recognize, I'm going to read this list of Jesus' miracles of healing. You're going to recognize many of them, but just listen as I read the list. Jesus healed an official's son at Capernaum in Galilee. He drove out an evil spirit from a man in Capernaum. He healed Peter's mother-in-law who was sick with a fever. Jesus cleansed a man who had leprosy. He healed a centurion's paralyzed servant. He healed a paralytic who was let down through the roof. He healed a man's withered hand on the Sabbath day. He cast demons out of a man into a herd of pigs. Jesus healed a woman in the crowd who was bleeding. He healed 2 men who were blind. He healed another man who was unable to speak. He healed an invalid at Bethesda. He healed a Gentile woman's demon-possessed daughter. He healed a man who was both deaf and dumb. Jesus healed a blind man at Bethsaida. He healed a man who had been born blind by spitting in his eyes. He He healed a boy who had an unclean spirit. He healed a man who was blind and mute. He healed a woman who had been crippled for 18 years. He healed a man with dropsy on the Sabbath day. He cleansed 10 lepers on the way to Jerusalem. He restored sight to a man named Bartimaeus in Jericho, and he healed the servant's severed ear while he was being arrested. There are twice as many miracles of healing than all the other miracles combined. We know that Jesus turned the water into wine. He walked on water. He calmed the storm. He fed the 5,000. Then he fed the 4,000. He raised someone from the dead 3 times. He caused a miraculous catch of fish 2 times. And of course, he rose from the dead himself. Those are the more general kind of miracles. I want to focus this morning on miracles of healing. Miracles of healing are so personal and so life-changing. Consider the difference between these 2 examples. On the one hand, you hear that there is a teacher outside your village. And so you go out and you sit down on the hillside and listen to his teaching. And you're captivated by it. He's like no one you've ever heard before. And the day passes, and he keeps teaching, and you keep listening. And at some point you realize that you didn't bring any lunch. And you're hungry, but you don't want to leave. You don't want to miss anything, and so you stay. And as the afternoon goes on, and your stomach's growling, and you're hungry, but you're listening to Jesus teach. And then he does an amazing thing. He takes a small boy's lunch, and he blesses it, and he prays over it, and he passes it out, and thousands of people eat until they're full, and there's a pile of food left over. It's an amazing miracle that you will never forget. But on the other hand, imagine that you were born blind. Imagine that you have never seen the light of day. You've never seen blue sky or green grass. You've never seen the faces of your loved ones. And Jesus comes along, and with just a word or a touch, he gives you sight. That is life-changing. I want to look at one of Jesus' miracles as an example this morning and see the impact that this healing has on not only on the person who was healed, but on the people who were there and saw it happen. But I also want us to see the impact of his miracle on his claim to be the way, the truth, and the life. In Mark chapter 2, we find this story. A few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come home. They gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even outside the door, and he preached the word to them. Some men came, bringing to him a paralyzed man carried by 4 of them. Since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it, and then lowered the mat the man was lying on. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." I want us to stop there and think about what's happening. So Jesus is in someone's home, and he's teaching, and people have heard about this marvelous teacher, and they've come to hear, and the house is packed, shoulder to shoulder, wall to wall, to the point where there's not room for even a single additional person to crowd inside. And so there are people standing outside the door trying to listen and hear what Jesus has to say. And these 4 men have heard that this teacher also has the ability to heal. And so they get their friend who is paralyzed, and they put him on a mat or a stretcher, and they carry him to the house. And when they get there, they see that there's no way they're going to be able to get inside. And now a house at this time might have been just a little square, 1-story, flat roof kind of structure. And there might have been even stairs on the outside that went up onto that flat roof. And so they carried their friend up onto the roof. And the roof was probably made of mud and clay and sticks that had been hardened and baked in the sun. And they went up there and they started digging. Now, meanwhile, back inside, Jesus is still teaching, and people are still listening until pieces of the ceiling start falling on their heads. Now, I look out this morning and I think you're listening. You're making eye contact. I don't hear any snoring. I think you're paying attention. But if all of a sudden pieces of the ceiling started falling on your heads, you would stop listening to me. You'd be a little distracted, right? Well, that's what happened. And so maybe at first it was a little dust, and then some little pieces, and then some bigger pieces, and they made a hole in the roof large enough to lower a mat with a man laying down on it. And they lowered their friend right down in front of Jesus. I can imagine at this point the room is silent. And every eye is on Jesus to see what he would do. Nothing was going to stop those four men from getting their friend to Jesus. Now let's pick up the story. It says, some teachers of the law were sitting there thinking to themselves, some teachers of the law were sitting there thinking to themselves, why does this fellow talk like that? He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone? Immediately Jesus knew in his spirit that this is what they were thinking in their hearts, and he said to them, why are you thinking these things? Which is easier, to say to this paralyzed man, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up, take your mat, and walk? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. So he said to the man, I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home. And he got up, took his mat, and walked out in full view of them all. This amazed everyone, and they praised God, saying, we have never seen anything like this. Jesus demonstrated that only the one who can heal the paralyzed man can forgive sins. You see, the religious leaders were right when they asked the question, who can forgive sins but God alone? No one. But it's also true, who can, with a word, heal the paralyzed man but God alone? No one. Only the one who could heal the paralyzed man can forgive sins. So Jesus was providing evidence of his claims. He said, I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. So I made a claim. I made a claim that I can forgive sins. To back up that claim, to support that claim, to convince you that that claim is true, I'm going to heal the paralyzed man. So only the one who can heal the paralyzed man can forgive sins, and only the one who can forgive sins can claim to be the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus made a claim. He provided evidence to support that claim. He changed the life of this man who had been paralyzed, gave him the ability to get up and walk, and he amazed the crowds. That's what only Jesus can do. Our work at Fame is to offer physical healing for the purpose of drawing people to the one who is the way, the truth, and the life. We call it medical evangelism. We don't perform miracles, but we offer healing through medicine, through quality medical care, and through health education. We are more in the role of the four friends We facilitate bringing people to the only one that can heal their bodies and their souls. I want to tell you about one of our FAME partners. So FAME, I explained this in more detail during Sunday school, but FAME works through partnerships. We don't own and operate hospitals overseas, but we work in partnership with people who do. Last year we worked with 73 mission partners in 43 different countries. And if we had time this morning, I could tell you about all of them. But then I'd preach longer than Steve, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to tell you about one. In 1947, a man named Charles Selby and his wife left their home in Nebraska. They went by train to San Francisco, where they got on a ship. 6 weeks later, that ship arrived in the port of Manila in the Philippines. And when they arrived in the Philippines, they stayed for 50 years. They devoted their entire lives to bringing the gospel to the people of the Philippines. So the country of the Philippines, we have a map here, okay, so you can see the map. The country of the Philippines is made up of over 7,000 islands. The largest of those islands is called Luzon, and that's where the capital city of Manila is. And when the Selbys arrived in Manila, they made their way north. And they kept going north literally until they got to the beach. On the very northern tip of the island of Luzon, there's a little town called Apari. And they settled in Apari. Now, it's a little bit of a challenge to get from Manila to Apari today. I don't have any idea how they got from Manila to Apari in 1947, but they did. And when they got to Apari, they started telling people about Jesus. They planted some churches. And when the churches started to grow, they started a Bible seminary to train preachers for those churches. And the Apari Bible Seminary is still going strong today. Over the time of their 50 years in the Philippines, they saw that there were medical needs in their community that were not being met. And they saw that as an opportunity for the gospel. And so late in the 50 years, many years after they had arrived in the Philippines, they came to FAME and they said, will you help us start a hospital? And FAME provided funding for the first hospital building. I think the next slide will give you an idea of the building and where it is. If you go one more slide, originally it was a 2-story building. Later they added on a 3rd story, and a couple years later, one more slide, we helped them finish out the 3rd floor to expand their capacity. And it was started as the Apari Christian Hospital because Mr. Selby said, you absolutely cannot name the hospital after me. But when he retired and left and came back to the U.S., they changed the name, and now it is the Charles W. Selby Memorial Hospital. And they are doing the work of medical evangelism. A couple years ago, we did a survey of some of our partners, and we just asked 2 simple questions. The first question was, how many patients did you treat in the last year? And the answer we got from the Charles Selby Hospital was 14,600, just total number of patients in 1 year. The second question was, how many of those patients heard about Jesus during their time at your facility? And you know what the answer was? 14,600. And now there may be some skeptics in the room and you're thinking, well, they probably just told you that because they thought that's what you wanted to hear. Maybe, but I don't think so. You see, I've been to the Charles Selby Hospital. I've spent time there. I've watched them in action. I got to know Frederico and Orlando, who are the hospital chaplains. I've talked to them. I've watched them at work. And you know what? I absolutely believe that everybody that comes to that hospital hears about Jesus. That's medical evangelism. It's meeting a physical need. It's meeting a healthcare need, and then using that as an opportunity to share the gospel. One of my visits there, I had a little free time one afternoon. I decided to walk to the beach. It's just a few blocks away, and while I was walking down the street, a guy stopped me and he said, "What are you doing here?" Apparently he thought I looked like I didn't belong. I said, "Well, I'm visiting some friends of mine over here at the hospital." And he said, "Oh, that's a great hospital." He said, "Anybody in this town that gets sick, they want to go to that hospital." See, there's a government hospital over on the other side of town. It's a scary looking place and nobody wants to go there. Well, do you think that people want to go to the Charles Selby Hospital so they can hear about Jesus? I don't. I think they want to go there because they know that's where they're going to get the absolute best medical care available to them. But when they go there, they will hear about Jesus. That's medical evangelism. A couple more pictures just for fun. The next slide. So when they expanded the hospital recently, this is their new laboratory. And this is the laboratory staff. And I know they look like they're about 13 years old, but these are highly trained medical professionals, and they do a fantastic job. The next slide, this is their operating room. On my first visit to the Selby Hospital, they gave me a tour, and I noticed a theme as we went from room to room. We would go into a room and they would say, "Well, this is and they'd point to a piece of equipment. They say, "We got this from Fame back in the 1980s, but it doesn't work anymore." And one of those stops was in the operating room, and they'd say, "This is our anesthesia machine that we got from Fame, 25 years ago, but it doesn't work anymore." So I show this picture because back in the corner is the new anesthesia machine that they got from Fame 3 or 4 years ago, and it works. And it's comforting for me to know that if for whatever reason I had to have surgery on there, I could be asleep while it happens. That's a good thing, right? And one more picture. I got to speak for Monday morning staff devotions at the hospital. And, we have Monday morning staff devotions at Fame, and Monday morning staff devotions are the same everywhere you go. People are tired from the weekend and they need coffee. But this is a group of dedicated people who are skilled at the work that they do, and they are committed to the gospel. I want you to know that the people in this picture are your partners. When you support Fame, you are making it possible for these people to do what they do. And I could go through the picture and I could tell you stories about these people. These are my friends. The girl on my immediate left, her name is Pia. She started working in the accounting office in the hospital in 1999. Now she has an MBA and she's the hospital administrator and doing a fantastic job. The guy in the yellow shirt kneeling in front of me, that's Frederico, one of the chaplains. He actually has retired since the time that since my last visit, so he's not there anymore. But I could tell you about the pharmacist and the head nurse, Daryl, and there are people in here that I know and love and that are grateful to you, even though you will never meet them. They are grateful to you for your support. So hopefully that gives you just a snapshot of one example. We have provided funding for construction. We have provided shipments of equipment and supplies that they needed. But as far as their day-to-day operations, this hospital is self-supporting. They're part of the Philippines National Health Insurance Program, and they have enough patients that can pay their way that they're able to treat the people who can't afford to pay their own way, and they are mostly self-supporting day to day. We help them with capital projects. The most recent one, we helped them purchase a generator because they're in Typhoon Alley, and every year they get hit with these huge storms that knock out their electricity, which is not all that reliable even when there's not storms. And so now they can operate their entire hospital on this generator. So we help them with capital projects, but otherwise it's all Philippine-owned, Philippine-operated, Philippine-staffed, and that's what we call sustainable healthcare. I really have two invitations this morning as we come to the close of our service. And the first is this. If you have never accepted the claim of Jesus to be the only way, to be the way, the truth, and the life, if you've never accepted the fact that no one can get to the Father except through Jesus, I invite you to do that today. And the second thing is I want to invite you to be part of the work at Fame. And you can do that in a number of different ways. You can do that by praying. You can do that by giving. You can do that by volunteering. You can even do that by going with us to visit our partners around the world. And we'll be out in the hallway after. I'd love to talk to you about any of those things. But those are the two invitations: to accept the claim of Jesus based on the evidence that he provided, and to join us in the work that God has called us to do.